The morning sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns of the Wellington estate, as Marcus Wellington adjusted his silk tie in the mirror of his Rolls-Royce. At 45, he had built an empire from nothing, turning a small tech startup into a billion-dollar corporation that employed thousands worldwide. His mansion sat on 50 acres of pristine land in the hills of California, complete with gardens that cost more to maintain than most people earned in a lifetime. As his driver navigated the winding driveway toward the main road, Marcus reviewed the day's agenda on his tablet. Board meetings, investor calls, and a charity gala that evening where he would smile and write checks to causes he barely understood. It was all part of the game, the dance of wealth and influence that had become his life. The car slowed as they approached the estate's ornate iron gates, and Marcus glanced up from his screen, annoyed at the delay. That's when he saw her, on her hands and knees beside the stone wall that bordered his property. An elderly black woman was pulling at something in the grass. At first he thought she might be gardening, but as he looked closer, his stomach dropped with a sickening realization. She was eating the grass. Her weathered hands moved methodically, plucking blades of grass and bringing them to her mouth with a desperation that made Marcus's chest tighten. Her clothes were old but clean, a faded blue dress that had seen too many washings and worn shoes that barely held together. Despite her obvious poverty, there was a dignity in the way she carried herself, even in this moment of profound need. Marcus had seen poverty before, of course. He had grown up in a working-class neighborhood before his success, and he regularly donated to homeless shelters and food banks. But seeing it like this, so raw and immediate just outside his own gates, struck him differently. This wasn't a statistic or a tax write-off. This was a human being so hungry that she was reduced to eating grass like an animal. "Stop the car," he said quietly to his driver. James, who had been with the family for over a decade, James pulled over immediately, his own face troubled as he witnessed the scene. The woman seemed oblivious to their presence, focused entirely on her grim task. Marcus watched her for another moment, his mind racing. Something about her seemed familiar, though he couldn't place why. "Sir," James said softly, "I think I know her. That's Elena Rodriguez. She used to work for your family when you were younger. She was your mother's housekeeper before your parents passed away." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena, of course. Memories flooded back of a kind woman who had always had a gentle word for him, who had made him sandwiches when he came home from school, who had listened to his teenage complaints about homework and girlfriends with infinite patience. She had been like a grandmother to him during some of the most difficult years of his life, but that had been over 20 years ago. After his parents died in the car accident and he inherited everything, he had sold the family home and moved away to build his business. The staff had been given generous severances, or so his lawyers had told him. He had been so consumed with grief and ambition that he hadn't given much thought to what happened to any of them afterward. Now, seeing Elena in this state, Marcus felt a shame so deep it made him physically ill. While he had been building his empire, accumulating wealth beyond imagination, this woman who had shown him such kindness was literally starving just miles away from his mansion. "James, I need to talk to her," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Of course, sir," James replied, understanding in his tone. Marcus stepped out of the car, his expensive Italian leather shoes crunching on the gravel shoulder of the road. Elena looked up at the sound, her eyes widening in recognition and then filling with a mixture of shame and fear. She tried to stand, brushing grass from her dress with shaking hands. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said gently, approaching slowly so as not to frighten her further. "Elena, it's me, Marcus Wellington." Elena's face crumpled and she seemed to shrink into herself. "Master Marcus," she whispered, using the formal address she had always used when he was a child. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was just so hungry and I thought maybe—" "Elena, please," Marcus interrupted, his heart breaking at the formal distance she maintained even now. "You don't need to explain anything to me, but I need to understand what's happening. How did things get so difficult for you?" Elena looked away, clearly struggling with embarrassment and pride. Marcus could see the war playing out on her weathered features, the desire to maintain her dignity, warring with her obvious desperation. Finally, she met his eyes again, and he saw in them the same gentle strength that had comforted him so many years ago. "It's a long story, Master Marcus. she said quietly. They got hard after I stopped working for your family, but that's not your concern. You have your own life to live. Marcus felt tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. Here was this woman, literally eating grass to survive, and she was still trying to protect him from feeling responsible. It was so typically Elena, always putting others before herself, always trying to shoulder burdens alone. Elena, he said firmly, you are absolutely my concern. You were family to me and I've failed you terribly, but I'm here now and I want to help. Please let me help you. Elena studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she saw there seemed to convince her, because her shoulders sagged slightly, some of the rigid pride leaving her posture. I don't know where to begin, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus gently took her arm, noting how frail she felt beneath the worn fabric of her dress. Let's start with getting you something to eat, he said. Real food. Then we can talk about everything else. As he helped Elena toward his car, Marcus caught sight of his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him was someone he barely recognized, someone whose wealth and success suddenly felt hollow and meaningless. All his achievements, all his accolades, all his money meant nothing if he couldn't protect and care for the people who had shown him love when he needed it most. James opened the rear door without being asked, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. Elena hesitated for a moment before allowing Marcus to help her into the luxurious interior of the Rolls-Royce, her calloused hands trembling as they touched the soft leather seats. The ride back to Marcus's estate passed in relative silence, broken only by Elena's quiet directions to cancel his morning meetings. Marcus couldn't take his eyes off Elena, who sat rigidly in the corner of the back seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Every few seconds her stomach would growl audibly, a sound that made Marcus wince with guilt and determination. When they arrived at the mansion, Elena stared up at the imposing structure with wide eyes. The house was nothing like the modest family home where she had once worked. This was a monument to wealth, with its soaring columns, expansive windows, and architectural flourishes that spoke of money spent without thought. Marcus noticed her expression and felt another pang of shame. While Elena had been struggling to survive, he had been building this palace, filling it with artwork worth more than most people's homes, surrounding himself with luxury that now seemed obscene in comparison to her suffering. Elena, please don't feel intimidated, Marcus said gently as James opened the car door. This is just a house. You're not a guest here. You're family. Elena allowed him to help her out of the car, but Marcus could see the way she held herself, the careful distance she maintained. Years of hardship had taught her to be cautious, to not trust too easily even when kindness was offered. It broke his heart to see how the warm, open woman he remembered had learned to guard herself so carefully. They entered through the main foyer, Elena's footsteps echoing softly on the marble floors. Marcus led her directly to the kitchen, a space that could have fed a small restaurant with its professional-grade appliances and enormous center island. Elena's eyes widened at the sight of the fully stocked pantry and the refrigerator that was larger than the room she currently called home. Sit, please, Marcus said, pulling out a chair at the breakfast nook that overlooked the gardens. Let me make you something to eat. For the first time since they had gotten into the car, Elena spoke up. Master Marcus, you don't need to cook for me. I can make something myself if you just show me where. Absolutely not, Marcus interrupted gently but firmly. You've spent your whole life taking care of other people. Let someone take care of you for once. As Marcus moved around the kitchen, his hands surprisingly sure despite the fact that he rarely cooked for himself anymore, Elena watched him with a mixture of amazement and concern. She couldn't reconcile the successful businessman she saw now with the gangly teenager she remembered, the boy who used to raid the kitchen for midnight snacks and complain about his homework. Marcus prepared a simple but nourishing meal, scrambled eggs with cheese, toast with butter and jam, fresh fruit, and a glass of orange juice. As he cooked, he found himself remembering countless mornings when Elena had done the same for him, preparing breakfast with love and care, making sure he ate well before school. When he set the plate in front of her, Elena's eyes filled with tears. This is too much, she whispered. I can't accept. Elena, Marcus said, sitting down across from her. Please eat. We can talk about everything else later, but right now you need food. Elena picked up the fork with shaking hands and took a small bite of the eggs. The expression that crossed her face was one of pure relief and gratitude. Marcus realized with horror that this might be the first real meal she had eaten in days, possibly weeks. As she ate, slowly at first and then with increasing hunger, Marcus felt his resolve strengthening. Whatever had happened to bring Elena to this point, he was going to fix it. "Elena," he said gently when she had finished most of the food, "I need to understand what happened. After my parents died, didn't the lawyers give you a severance? I specifically asked them to make sure all the staff were taken care of." Elena nodded, setting down her fork carefully. "Yes, Master Marcus, they did. It was very generous, more than I expected. But then—" She paused, her hands twisting in her lap. "Please," Marcus encouraged. "Whatever happened, it's not your fault, and I'm not judging you. I just need to know so I can help." Elena took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was quiet but steady as she told her story. After leaving the Wellington family's employ, she had found another job as a housekeeper. But the pay was much less than what she had earned before. She had used most of her severance to put her grandson, Miguel, through college. He had been the first in their family to get a higher education, and she had been so proud. But then Miguel had been diagnosed with leukemia during his senior year. Elena had spent every penny she had on his medical treatments, selling her small house to pay for experimental therapies that the insurance wouldn't cover. For 2 years she had fought alongside Miguel, working multiple jobs to afford his care, never giving up hope. Marcus listened in silence, his heart breaking with every word. Elena's voice remained steady as she described watching her beloved grandson waste away, despite all her efforts and sacrifices. Miguel had died 6 months ago, leaving Elena not only devastated by grief but also completely financially ruined. "The medical bills were so large," Elena continued, her voice barely above a whisper now. "Even after Miguel passed, the hospital wanted their money. I lost everything trying to save him, and now I owe more than I could pay in 10 lifetimes." She had been evicted from her small apartment 2 months ago and had been staying in her old, broken-down car ever since. She was too proud to ask for help from the few friends she had left, and too ashamed to reach out to any of her former employers. She had been surviving on whatever odd jobs she could find, cleaning houses for cash when her arthritis would allow it. "But the work is hard to find," she admitted. "People want younger housekeepers, ones who can move faster, lift heavier things, and without a permanent address, it's hard to keep any job for long." Marcus felt sick listening to her story. While Elena had been sacrificing everything for her grandson's medical care, he had been complaining about stock prices and board meetings. While she had been sleeping in her car, he had been debating which of his vacation homes to visit for the weekend. "Elena," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am so sorry. Sorry that you went through all of that alone. Sorry that I wasn't there when you needed help. Sorry that the system failed you so completely." Elena looked up at him with surprise. "Master Marcus, you have nothing to be sorry for. You didn't know, and even if you had, you have your own life, your own responsibilities. I made my choices." "But you shouldn't have had to make those choices alone," Marcus insisted. "You were family to me, Elena. You helped raise me, you comforted me when my parents died, you showed me more genuine love and care than most people ever receive. The fact that you've been suffering while I've been living in luxury, it's unacceptable." Elena studied his face carefully, seeing the genuine anguish there. "You were always a good boy, Marcus," she said softly. "Even when you were being difficult as a teenager, your heart was good. I can see it's still good." Marcus reached across the table and gently covered her weathered hands with his own. "Elena, I want to help you. I need to help you, but I need you to let me. Can you do that?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with her pride and her desperate circumstances. Finally, she nodded slowly. "I don't know how you can help with problems this big," she said honestly. "But I'm tired, Marcus. I'm so tired of fighting alone." Marcus squeezed her hands gently. "You're not alone anymore," he promised. "We're going to figure this out together, all of it. The medical debt, finding you a place to live, everything. But first, I want to hear more about Miguel. Tell me about him." Elena's face transformed when she began talking about her grandson. Despite her grief, her love for him shone through every word as she described his dreams of becoming a teacher, his gentle nature, his determination to fight his illness with grace and courage. Marcus listened to every word, filing away details, already beginning to form plans that went far beyond simply solving Elena's immediate problems. After Elena finished sharing memories of Miguel, Marcus excused himself to make some phone calls. He retreated to his home office, a room lined with awards and photographs documenting his business success. But all of it felt meaningless now. His first call was to his personal attorney, David Morrison, who had handled his affairs for over 15 years. "David, I need you to drop everything and help me with something urgent," Marcus said without preamble when his lawyer answered. "Of course, Marcus. What's the situation?" Marcus explained Elena's circumstances, her medical debt, and her current living situation. He could hear David taking notes on the other end of the line. "I want you to contact every hospital, every collection agency, every entity that has a claim against Elena Rodriguez. I want all of her medical debt purchased and forgiven, all of it. I don't care what it costs." David was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, that's admirable. But medical debt forgiveness can be complicated legally. There might be tax implications for her and—" "Then handle the tax implications too," Marcus interrupted. "I want her completely free of all financial obligations related to her grandson's medical care. Make it happen, David. Today." "I'll start immediately," David assured him. "What else?" Marcus's second call was to Sarah Chen, the head of his foundation's humanitarian programs. Sarah had been instrumental in helping Marcus identify worthy causes for his charitable giving over the years. "Sarah, I need you to research educational scholarship programs, specifically ones that honor the memory of students who passed away before graduating. I want to establish something significant, something that would make a real difference in young people's lives." "That sounds wonderful, Marcus. Do you have a specific school or demographic in mind?" "I want to create the Miguel Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship Fund," Marcus said. "Full-ride scholarships for students from low-income families who want to study education. I want it to be substantial enough to help dozens of students every year." Sarah's voice grew excited as she grasped the vision. "That's a beautiful way to honor someone's memory. How substantial are we talking about?" "Start with a $10 million endowment," Marcus said without hesitation. "We can always add more later." His third call was to his real estate manager, Patricia Holbrook. "Patricia, I need you to find me properties. Nothing flashy but comfortable, safe neighborhoods. I'm looking for a small house, maybe 2 or 3 bedrooms with a garden. Somewhere with dignity but not ostentatious." "For investment purposes?" Patricia asked. "No, for someone very special to me. Someone who deserves a real home." While Marcus made his calls, Elena remained in the kitchen, hardly able to believe the turn her day had taken. Just hours ago, she had been reduced to eating grass by the roadside, certain that her life had reached its lowest point. Now she sat in a kitchen more luxurious than any she had ever seen, having been fed a meal prepared with love by a man she had helped raise. James appeared in the doorway, carrying a fresh cup of tea and a plate of cookies. "Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Wellington asked me to make sure you were comfortable. Is there anything else you need?" Elena accepted the tea gratefully, noting how James treated her with the same respect he showed his employer. "Thank you, James. You're very kind. If you don't mind me saying, Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Wellington has talked about you over the years. He's never forgotten the kindness you showed him when he was young." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "He was such a good boy. Even when he was struggling with grief after his parents passed, he always had a kind word for everyone." James nodded. "He's still that same person underneath all the business success. Today proves that." When Marcus returned to the kitchen an hour later, Elena could see that something had changed in his demeanor. There was an energy about him, a sense of purpose that reminded her of the determined teenager she had once known. "Elena," he said, sitting down across from her again, "I've made some phone calls, and I want you to know that we're going to solve this debt problem. My lawyers are already working on it." Elena's hand flew to her chest. "Marcus, no. That's too much. I can't let you—" "Elena, please listen to me," Marcus said gently but firmly. "The money means nothing to me compared to seeing you suffer. Nothing, and this isn't charity, it's family helping family. You'd do the same for me if our situations were reversed." Elena knew he was right, but the magnitude of her debt seemed impossible to overcome. "But it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, Marcus. Maybe more. I don't even know the exact amount anymore." "I don't care if it's millions," Marcus said sincerely. "Elena, I make more money in a single day than most people see in their entire lives. That debt that's been crushing you, it's nothing to me financially, but everything to me personally, because it's your burden, and you shouldn't have to carry it alone." Elena wept quietly, Overwhelmed by the magnitude of his generosity, Marcus reached across the table and took her hands again. "There's something else," he continued. "I want to establish a scholarship fund in Miguel's memory. I want his name to live on by helping other young people pursue their dreams of becoming teachers, just like he wanted to do." Elena's weeping became more intense, but Marcus could see that these were tears of relief and gratitude rather than despair. He would have been so honored, she managed to say. Teaching was everything to him. He used to say that teachers could change the world one student at a time. "Then that's exactly what we'll do," Marcus said. "We'll change the world in Miguel's name, one student at a time." They sat together in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Elena processing the incredible turn her life had taken. Finally, she looked up at Marcus with the same gentle smile he remembered from his childhood. "You know," she said softly, "Miguel used to ask me about you sometimes. He'd heard stories about the boy I used to take care of, and he was always curious about what happened to you. I used to tell him that I was sure you had grown up to be someone special, someone who would make a difference in the world." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I hope I can live up to that faith." "You already have," Elena assured him. "Today you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope." Marcus stood up and walked around the table to embrace Elena gently. She felt so fragile in his arms, but he could sense the strength that had carried her through so much hardship. As they held each other, Marcus made a silent promise that Elena would never want for anything again, that the woman who had shown him such love when he needed it most would spend the rest of her days surrounded by comfort and security. "Elena," he said as they separated, "I have one more surprise for you, but for that we need to take a drive." Elena looked puzzled but nodded trustingly. "Wherever you think we should go." As they prepared to leave, Marcus felt a lightness in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in decades, his wealth felt meaningful, his success purposeful. He wasn't just a billionaire anymore. He was a man who had the power to transform lives, starting with the woman who had helped transform his own so many years ago. The drive through the tree-lined suburban streets gave Elena a chance to see a part of the city she had never explored before. These neighborhoods spoke of quiet prosperity, where families raised children in safety and comfort. Marcus watched her face as she took in the well-maintained homes, the carefully tended gardens, the children playing in front yards under the watchful eyes of their parents. "This area is called Riverside Gardens," Marcus explained as James navigated the winding streets. "It's a community where people know their neighbors, where kids can walk to school safely, where there's a real sense of belonging." Elena nodded, wondering why Marcus was showing her this particular neighborhood. She had lived in many places over the years, but never anywhere quite like this. These homes represented a stability she had never dared to dream of for herself. James pulled into the driveway of a charming single-story house with pale yellow siding and white trim. The front yard was modest but beautifully landscaped, with rose bushes flanking the front porch and a small garden area that showed evidence of recent professional care. A large oak tree provided shade over most of the front lawn, and Elena could imagine children climbing its sturdy branches. "Why are we stopping here?" Elena asked, confusion evident in her voice. Marcus smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Elena had seen on his face all day. "Because this is your new home, Elena." Elena stared at him in shock, then looked back at the house. "Marcus, no. This is too much. I can't accept something like this." "Elena," Marcus said gently, "this house has been sitting empty for 3 months while my real estate team looked for the right buyer. The previous owners moved to be closer to their grandchildren, and they specifically asked that it go to someone who would love it and care for it the way they did." He pulled out a set of keys and placed them in Elena's trembling hands. "When I told Patricia about you, about what you've been through, she said this house was meant to be yours. The previous owners left behind their garden tools and even some furniture. They wanted their home to go to someone who would appreciate its history." Elena looked down at the keys in her palm, hardly able to comprehend what was happening. "But Marcus, I can't afford—" "The house is paid for," Marcus said simply. "Completely. The deed is being transferred to your name as we speak. The property taxes, utilities, everything is set up in an account that will cover all expenses indefinitely." Elena began to cry again, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his generosity. "I don't understand why you're doing all this for me." Marcus took her hands in his, keys and all. Elena, do you remember when I was 16 and my parents died? Do you remember how lost I was, how angry at the world? Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. You were just a boy dealing with more pain than any child should have to bear. You could have just done your job, Marcus continued. You could have cleaned the house and cooked the meals and gone home to your own family. But you didn't. You stayed late to listen to me rant about how unfair life was. You made me hot chocolate when I couldn't sleep. You drove me to school when I was too depressed to take the bus because you knew the other kids would ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. Elena remembered those difficult months after the accident. Marcus had been so angry, so lost, pushing everyone away while desperately needing connection and comfort. You saved my life, Elena, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Not dramatically, not in some heroic way, but quietly, consistently, with 1,000 small acts of love and kindness. You showed me that even in the darkest times there were still good people in the world, still reasons to keep going. Elena squeezed his hands. You would have been fine without me, Marcus. You're strong. Maybe, Marcus conceded, but I wouldn't have been the same person. Every success I've had, every good thing I've built, it started with the foundation you helped give me. The idea that I could be worthy of love and kindness, that I had value beyond my money or achievements, that came from you. They sat in the car for several more minutes, both lost in memories of those difficult but important years. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. Would you like to see inside? Elena nodded, still clutching the keys. They walked up the front path together, Marcus noting how Elena's steps became more confident as she approached the front door. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and they stepped into a world of possibilities. The interior was warm and inviting, with hardwood floors and large windows that filled the space with natural light. The previous owners had left behind comfortable furniture in earth tones, paintings of landscapes and gardens on the walls, and even some books on the built-in shelves. The kitchen was modest but well-equipped, with a breakfast nook that looked out onto the backyard garden. Elena moved through the room slowly, running her fingers along surfaces, testing the comfort of chairs, examining everything with wonder. In the master bedroom, she stood at the window looking out at the backyard where fruit trees and flower beds created a private paradise. There's a small greenhouse in the back, Marcus said, joining her at the window. The previous owners were avid gardeners. Patricia mentioned that they hoped whoever bought the house would continue to care for their plants. Elena turned to face him, her expression full of amazement and gratitude. Marcus, I've never had a garden of my own. Even when I owned that little house I sold for Miguel's treatment, it was too small for more than a few potted plants. Then this will be perfect for you, Marcus said. You always loved the gardens at my parents' house. I remember finding you out there in the early morning, tending to my mother's roses before anyone else was awake. Elena nodded, remembering those peaceful moments. Your mother had the most beautiful garden. She taught me so much about caring for plants, about patience and nurturing growth. They completed the tour in the second bedroom, which had been set up as a comfortable reading room with built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking the front yard. Elena could already envision herself spending quiet evenings here, reading and watching the neighborhood families go about their daily routines. Elena, Marcus said as they returned to the living room, I know this is all overwhelming, but I need you to understand something. This isn't about guilt or obligation on my part. This is about love, about family, about making sure that the woman who helped shape me into the man I became never has to worry about having a safe, comfortable home again. Elena sank into one of the armchairs, still holding the keys tightly. I don't know what to say, Marcus. Thank you seems so inadequate for something like this. You don't need to thank me, Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her. You just need to be happy here. You need to plant that garden and fill these rooms with joy and maybe invite neighbors over for coffee. You need to live, Elena, not just survive. Elena looked around the room again, beginning to truly believe that this was real, that this beautiful home was actually hers. I think Miguel would have loved this place, she said softly. He always dreamed of having a big garden someday, maybe growing vegetables to share with neighbors. Then you'll grow that garden for both of you, Marcus said. And every time you harvest tomatoes or see the roses bloom, you'll know that his dreams are still alive in the world. Elena stood up and walked to Marcus, embracing him with a strength that surprised them both. "Thank you for giving me back my life," she whispered. "Thank you for reminding me what hope feels like." As they held each other in Elena's new living room, Marcus realized that this day had changed him as much as it had changed her. For years he had been successful but not truly fulfilled, wealthy but not really rich in the ways that mattered most. Today, he had rediscovered what it meant to use his resources for something that really mattered, to be part of something larger than quarterly earnings and stock prices. 3 months later, Marcus stood in Elena's backyard garden, marveling at the transformation that had taken place. What had once been a neat but somewhat sterile landscape had burst into vibrant life under Elena's careful attention. Tomato plants heavy with fruit lined one side of the yard, while colorful flowers created borders around the entire space. The small greenhouse had been converted into a thriving nursery, where Elena started seedlings that she shared freely with her new neighbors. "The roses are your mother's favorite variety," Elena said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of fresh lemonade made from the lemons of her own tree. "I found a nursery that still carried them, and I thought it would be nice to have something that connected this garden to the one she loved so much." Marcus accepted the lemonade gratefully, noting how different Elena looked now compared to that terrible morning when he had found her eating grass. She had gained weight, her cheeks were rosy from time spent in the sun, and there was a lightness in her step that spoke of security and contentment. But most importantly, the spark in her eyes had returned, the joy that he remembered from his childhood. "Elena, I have some news to share with you," Marcus said as they settled into the comfortable outdoor furniture she had chosen for her patio. "The Miguel Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship Fund has received its first applications." Elena's face lit up with interest. "Tell me about them." Marcus pulled out a folder containing photos and applications. "There are 47 applicants for the first 5 scholarships. These are students from backgrounds similar to Miguel's, young people who want to become teachers despite financial obstacles that would normally make college impossible." He showed her photo after photo, each one representing a young person with dreams and determination. Elena studied each application carefully, reading about students who worked multiple jobs to help support their families, who had overcome personal tragedies, who saw education as a pathway to breaking cycles of poverty and hardship. This young woman, Maria Santos, wants to become a special education teacher because her younger brother has autism, and she's seen firsthand how much difference a caring teacher can make, Marcus explained. And this young man, James Patterson, grew up in foster care and credits his high school English teacher with helping him believe in himself. Elena wiped away tears as she looked through the applications. Miguel would be so proud to know that his name is connected to helping these beautiful young people achieve their dreams. "The scholarship committee wants to interview you as part of the selection process," Marcus continued. "They feel that your perspective as Miguel's grandmother would be invaluable in choosing recipients who would truly honor his memory." Elena nodded enthusiastically. "I would be honored to help choose the scholarship winners. I want to make sure we select students who have Miguel's combination of determination and compassion." They were interrupted by a knock at the front door. Elena excused herself to answer it, returning a few minutes later with a middle-aged woman carrying a casserole dish. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet my neighbor Susan Chen," Elena said. "Susan, this is Marcus, the young man I've told you about." Susan shook Marcus's hand warmly. "Elena talks about you constantly," she said with a smile. "She's told the whole neighborhood about your kindness and how you've helped her start over." Marcus felt slightly embarrassed by the praise. Elena is the one who deserves credit. She's built this beautiful new life for herself, with a little help from someone who remembered what family really means. Susan replied knowingly. "Elena has become the heart of our neighborhood. She's helped me with my own garden. She watches the Henderson children after school when their parents are working late. And she's organized a community potluck dinner every month." After Susan left, Marcus and Elena continued their conversation about the scholarship fund. Elena shared ideas about creating mentorship programs for the scholarship recipients, ways to provide ongoing support beyond just financial assistance. "These young people will need more than money," Elena observed. "They'll need guidance, encouragement, and sometimes just someone who believes in them when things get difficult." Marcus was struck again by Elena's wisdom and her instinct to nurture others even when she had been struggling herself. "Would you be interested in helping coordinate that kind of support system?" We could create a formal mentorship program as part of the scholarship fund. Elena's eyes brightened with excitement. I would love that, Marcus. I may not have Miguel's education, but I have experience helping young people navigate challenges, and I have time now thanks to your generosity. As the afternoon wore on, they discussed plans for expanding the scholarship program, ideas for community partnerships, and ways to ensure Miguel's legacy would continue to grow. Marcus found himself energized by Elena's insights and her natural ability to see what people needed most. Elena, Marcus said as the sun began to set over her garden, I need to tell you something. These past 3 months working on Miguel's scholarship fund, seeing how you've built this new life, watching you help your neighbors, it's changed me in ways I didn't expect. Elena looked at him curiously. How so? For years I've been successful in business, but I felt empty in my personal life. I've had money, influence, all the things society says should make me happy, but I've been lonely. I've been going through the motions of living without really feeling alive. Marcus paused, gathering his thoughts. But seeing how you've faced such tremendous loss and hardship with grace, how you've maintained your capacity for kindness and generosity even when you had nothing, it's reminded me what really matters. It's shown me what I want my legacy to be. Elena reached over and patted his hand gently. You're a good man, Marcus. You always were, even as that angry teenager who was trying to make sense of loss. But sometimes it takes difficult experiences to show us who we really are underneath all the surface things. I've decided to restructure my foundation, Marcus announced. Instead of just writing checks to existing charities, I want to create programs that directly connect me to the people we're helping. I want to know their stories, understand their needs, be part of their solutions in meaningful ways. Elena smiled proudly. That sounds exactly like something the boy I raised would decide to do when he grew up. I'm also planning to step back from day-to-day operations of my company, Marcus continued. I'll remain involved, but I want to focus more time on making a direct difference in individual lives, starting with expanding Miguel's scholarship program into something much larger. Elena listened as Marcus outlined his vision for educational initiatives that would provide not just scholarships but comprehensive support systems for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. He spoke passionately about creating pathways for young people to break cycles of poverty through education, about building communities of support around students who needed more than financial assistance. Miguel's story, your sacrifice for him, it's shown me that education isn't just about individual achievement, Marcus said. It's about families, communities, entire generations lifting each other up. I want to honor that. As darkness fell, Elena insisted that Marcus stay for dinner. They sat in her cozy kitchen, sharing a simple meal that Elena had prepared with vegetables from her own garden. The conversation flowed easily between memories of the past and dreams for the future. Marcus, Elena said as they finished eating, I need you to know that you've given me more than a house and financial security. You've given me purpose again. For months after Miguel died, I felt like my life was over, like I had nothing left to contribute to the world. She gestured around her kitchen, then toward the backyard where her garden was thriving. But now I have this beautiful home, these wonderful neighbors, and the opportunity to help other young people achieve their dreams in Miguel's memory. You've reminded me that even at my age, even after everything I've lost, I still have value. I still have love to give. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Elena, you've always had value. You've always had so much to give. I just helped create circumstances where that could flourish again. That's exactly what good families do for each other, Elena said softly. They help each other flourish, especially during the difficult times. As Marcus prepared to leave that evening, Elena walked him to his car carrying a basket of tomatoes and flowers from her garden. The neighborhood was quiet, with warm light glowing from windows and the sound of families enjoying their evening routines. This neighborhood, this life you've made possible for me, Elena said. It's everything I ever dreamed of but never thought I could have. But more than that, it's given me the chance to be useful again, to help others the way you've helped me. Marcus hugged Elena goodbye, breathing in the scent of her garden that clung to her clothes, feeling grateful for the woman who had shaped his childhood and was now helping to reshape his adult life in ways he never could have imagined. 1 year later, Marcus stood at a podium in the auditorium of the local community college, looking out at an audience of scholarship recipients, their families, community members, and local educators. The first annual Miguel Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship Award ceremony had drawn a crowd far larger than anyone had anticipated, with local news crews capturing the event and several other wealthy individuals expressing interest in creating similar programs. Elena sat in the front row, wearing a beautiful navy blue dress that Marcus had helped her choose for the occasion. Beside her sat Maria Santos, the special education major who had become like a granddaughter to Elena over the past year. The mentorship program Elena had helped design had paired each scholarship recipient with a community volunteer. But Elena had taken on a special role coordinating the entire support network. When we created the Miguel Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship Fund, Marcus began his speech. We wanted to honor the memory of a young man who believed that education could change the world one student at a time. Today, as we celebrate the achievements of our first scholarship recipients, we can see that Miguel's belief was absolutely right. He gestured to the group of young adults seated in the second row, each one representing a success story that went far beyond academic achievement. James Patterson, the former foster care student, was now majoring in English education and had started a tutoring program for other students aging out of the foster system. Maria Santos had maintained a perfect GPA while working with special needs children at a local center, already making a difference in young lives. But this program has taught me something I didn't expect, Marcus continued. While we created these scholarships to change the lives of deserving students, they have changed us just as much. They have reminded all of us what it means to be part of a community, to invest in each other's success, to believe in the power of education to transform not just individuals but entire families and neighborhoods. Elena dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as Marcus spoke about the ripple effects of the scholarship program. The recipients hadn't just succeeded academically. They had become leaders in their own communities, starting volunteer programs, mentoring younger students, and inspiring their own family members to pursue educational goals they had previously thought impossible. I want to share with you the story of how this program really began, Marcus said, his voice growing more personal. It didn't start in a boardroom or with a philanthropic planning committee. It started on a roadside where I encountered someone who had been like family to me, someone who had sacrificed everything for love and had been forgotten by a system that should have protected her. He told Elena's story, with her permission, describing how finding her eating grass had shattered his comfortable assumptions about success and responsibility. He spoke about the woman who had helped raise him, who had shown him kindness during the darkest period of his youth, and how seeing her suffering had forced him to confront what his wealth really meant. Elena Rodriguez taught me that true success isn't measured by stock portfolios or business achievements, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. It's measured by how we care for each other, especially for those who have cared for us. It's measured by whether we use our blessings to lift others up, to create opportunities for people to flourish and contribute their own gifts to the world. When Marcus finished his speech, the audience rose in sustained applause. Elena stood as well, her face radiant with pride and joy, not just for Marcus, but for all the young people whose lives had been transformed by Miguel's Memorial Fund. During the reception that followed, Marcus watched Elena move through the crowd like the natural community builder she had always been. She knew every scholarship recipient by name, remembered details about their families and goals, and had somehow managed to connect each of them with additional resources and support networks throughout the year. Mr. Wellington, Maria Santos approached him with a young man Marcus didn't recognize. I'd like you to meet my brother, David. He's a junior in high school, and he's interested in applying for next year's scholarship. Marcus shook David's hand, noting the same determination in his eyes that he had seen in his sister's application. What do you want to study, David? Math education, David replied confidently. Maria has told me so much about the program, about Mrs. Elena and how the scholarships include mentorship and support beyond just tuition. I want to be a high school math teacher in communities like ours, where a lot of kids think they're not smart enough for math. As Marcus talked with David about his goals and dreams, he felt the familiar surge of purpose that had become a constant in his life since reconnecting with Elena. This was what wealth was supposed to do, he realized. Not just accumulate for its own sake, but create opportunities for human potential to flourish. Later that evening, Marcus and Elena sat in her garden, now more beautiful than ever with a full year of growth and care. The scholarship ceremony had been a success beyond their wildest dreams, but more importantly, it had demonstrated the kind of lasting impact they had hoped to create. Miguel would be so proud, Elena said softly, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Not just of the scholarships, but of seeing how his memory has brought so many people together. How it's created this community of people who care about each other's success. Marcus nodded, thinking about all the connections that had formed around the scholarship program. Recipients mentoring younger students, families supporting each other through challenges, community members volunteering their time and expertise, local businesses offering internships and job opportunities. Elena, Marcus said, I've been thinking about something, and I want to run it by you. Elena turned to face him with interest. I want to establish a community center, Marcus continued, somewhere that can serve as a hub for educational support, mentorship programs, job training, and community building. I want to call it the Elena Rodriguez Community Center. Elena's eyes widened in shock. Marcus, no. You can't name something like that after me. Why not? Marcus asked gently. You've been the heart of everything we've built here. You've shown me what it means to really serve a community, to see people's potential and help them reach it. A community center bearing your name would inspire people for generations. Elena was quiet for several minutes, clearly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Marcus was proposing. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. If you really want to do something like that, could we call it the Miguel and Elena Rodriguez Community Center? I'd like his name to be part of it too. Marcus smiled, recognizing the perfect compromise. I think that's exactly what it should be called. As they sat together in the peaceful garden Elena had created, surrounded by the fruits of her labor and the evidence of dreams made real, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he had been a successful but empty man who had forgotten what really mattered. Elena had been a woman broken by loss and financial ruin, reduced to eating grass to survive. Now they were family again, in the truest sense of the word. They were partners in creating opportunities for others, in building community, in honoring the memory of a young man whose dreams lived on through the achievements of dozens of other students. Marcus had found purpose beyond profit, and Elena had found hope beyond grief. Thank you, Elena, Marcus said as the evening grew late and they prepared to go inside. Thank you for saving my life twice. Once when I was a lost teenager, and again when I was a lost adult who had forgotten what success really means. Elena hugged him tightly. This man she had helped raise who had grown into someone who would make any mother proud. Thank you for reminding me that even in the darkest times, love finds a way to return to us. And thank you for making sure Miguel's dreams didn't die with him. As Marcus drove home that night, he passed the place where he had first seen Elena eating grass by the roadside. The memory still had the power to break his heart, but now it also filled him with gratitude. That terrible moment had led to this beautiful year of rediscovering what it meant to be truly wealthy, not in dollars but in relationships, purpose, and the ability to transform lives. Tomorrow, he would start planning the community center that would bear Elena and Miguel's names. But tonight, he was simply grateful to be the man Elena had always believed he could become, someone who understood that the greatest fortune wasn't what he could accumulate for himself, but what he could share with others, especially those who had shaped his heart when it needed shaping most.